It is Tuesday morning for everyone who didn't know that already. I've been guilty of that myself. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Randolph, who is going to be leading our session this morning.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, and Julia and Catherine and all of the folks who work behind the scenes know Tuesday are usually Technology Tuesday. We always have some sort of a stuff going on technology-wise on Tuesdays, particularly in the afternoon. But today we're going to deal with a really important topic. We're going to talk about diversity and inclusion. This will be our third presentation on diversity and inclusion. We started with Dr. Michelle Cook. I did one last week. We're having one this week. And what we're going to do is continue to have these conversations about diversity and inclusion, the importance of what it means to auxiliaries, as well as what are the steps that we as a broad unit, a targeted unit, or an individual can do to transform the diversity landscape, the landscape of respect in both in auxiliaries and at the University of Georgia. So today we're going to do something slightly different. We will actually have a 2 o'clock like conversation at 10 o'clock. So for those who haven't been a part of our 2 o'clock sessions you experienced this morning, what we typically do at 2, where we open up the mics and we allow people to engage. So we're actually doing a facilitated discussion today. I have a few prompters that I will put out there, and we'll unmute people and engage in a full dialogue and discussion. This is the first of a series of dialogues and discussions that we're going to have around diversity and inclusion. We will pick specific topical areas, so today we really are talking about race, but we'll pick specific topical areas. And as we get more familiarized with some of the technology that we're testing, we're going to actually do some breakout groups on these 10 a.m. sessions where we talk about diversity and inclusion. I'm going to share my screen real quickly to get us started. Julia, can you confirm that we're good there?
We can see it.
All right, very good. So we're talking about diversity and inclusion in auxiliary services. We're trying to make it as specifically focused as possible, so join us in these discussions. Now, over the course of the next several weeks, as we do these diversity and inclusion discussions, we're going to have 3 areas of focus. So the first area, and Dr. Michelle Cook talked about this a little bit, she had awareness, she had tools, and for her, she had challenges. We're going to look at it from the perspective of awareness, skills, and tools. And I'll break these down for you to explain what we mean by that. Our session today will be more about awareness. So awareness, particularly when it comes to diversity and inclusion, is what is it that I need to know? What is it that I need to be aware of? What are these different thematic areas? What are the historical contexts? What is the wealth of information that exists that I may not be aware of, that I need to be aware of? That's one piece of it. Another piece of it is how aware am I of my own biases, and how aware am I of microaggressions and some of these other things that either I'm perpetrating or that are perpetrated against me by others. And so today, mostly we will be doing a little bit of that. What is it that I feel and I think about these things? What is it that others feel and think about some of these aspects? But then what does the literature say? What is the research that's been done around diversity and inclusion in any specific topic say? In subsequent weeks, we're going to look at how do I build some skills? You know, how do I engage in these kind of conversations and be comfortable asking the questions that may make me a little uncomfortable, or be comfortable receiving questions that may make me a little uncomfortable. And then last but not the least, what are the tools? What are the materials and resources and guides and videos that are out there that I can use to build not just awareness and gain some skills, but that, you know, if I'm in that conversation and and a customer comes up, or if I'm at my desk and a customer comes up and says something, that I can pull out a little handy guy, kind of do a little cheat peek and say, you know what, I need to ask X question, I need to ask Y question. Ordinarily, I would have gone off on that person, but now I need to make sure that there are tools that can assist me in moving these kinds of conversations and transitions forward. So awareness, skills, and tools, that will be our focus for all of our diversity and inclusion engagement in auxiliaries over the next few weeks. We're going to try to include one session every week. It may be a 10 a.m. session, or it may happen at 2 p.m., but it will be these facilitated type discussions. So we can't leave our three mantras. So thinking bigger, and when it comes to the issue of diversity and inclusion, specifically this particular session, we're going to talk about race. So when it comes to the issue of race, we have to think bigger. So thinking bigger isn't just, we talk about thinking bigger from a business standpoint. We have to think bigger in everything we do and in everything that we engage around. And in thinking bigger about race is what we're trying to do today as well. We definitely and obviously have to put people first, not just our customers, but the people who work next to us. And in putting people first, we have to see the individual first. We have to learn a little bit about the individual. We have to learn about their identities and intersectionality and all of those things. And we'll touch some of those over the course of the next couple of weeks as we really dive into these. And then there's the bubble organization. And we all know what this is by now. And if you don't know, it's where rather than having these lines so constricted that you can only speak to the person above or below you, we've knocked those apart and allowed you to be able to speak across the organization. But speaking of the bubble organization, when we start entering these kinds of discussions and dialogues, the bubble organization still works. And so I've added a little flair to it in terms of how do we have productive discussions. And as we seek to grow together, as we seek to learn together, as we seek to achieve more, productive discussions are fundamental. Now, productive discussions aren't always easy discussions. They're not always the funnest thing to do, but they're fundamental in how we grow. Until we have a conversation about diversity and inclusion and all of the different thematic areas of that, we miss the boat and we miss good opportunities to be not just a productive unit, but to build a culture within our units where people feel like they can grow, they can thrive, they can really become who they want to be, and their best selves for our organization. So if you look, you see a different flair to the bubble organization. The middle button there is really not a person. The middle button there is an issue. And for us, diversity and inclusion is one of those issues that we're going to make that middle button today. And what you notice there is that there's a circle of people joined around discussing back and forth about the issue. And my hope is that is what we'll be able to accomplish today. Remember, we don't have to finish all of our discussions today. Those discussions can continue with phone calls directly to us or to other members of your team. They can continue with feedback and the feedback mechanisms we've made available on the resource page. And they will continue down the road in subsequent weeks when we bring more people in. We do intend to bring some diversity experts to help facilitate these conversations once we get them running and going. The other thing about these conversations that I wanted to introduce is there are really four kind of people who would engage in these. And I want you to identify for yourself, where do you fit in terms of these? So I think about it in terms of a car crash. Nobody died. The car just had an accident. Somebody was on their phone, unfortunately, and they didn't pay attention and they swerved and got off the road and punctured their tire. And and you're on a 2-lane road, and all of a sudden, somebody has this incident. So there's people who are the first responders. And the first responders are those people who, they stop. They have to stop. They have an obligation to stop. So in our conversations, there will be first responders, people who have an obligation to respond. Now, their response may be ideal. Their response may not be ideal. But these are the people who who either have an obligation or are fearless in terms of being there and taking some sort of an action. So in our conversations, we'll have some first responders. Then we will also have some nice folks. Now, let me tell you who the nice folks are in our conversation. Go back to my accident analogy. The nice folks are those people who will pull over and stop and say, "Are you okay? Should I call 911? Do you need some water?" Those are the nice folks. Those folks are taking action, but they're really action sometimes at that superficial level where they just want to show solidarity, but don't want to get deeper and dirty if things don't look as easy and as clean as they should be. So in our conversations, I expect that we will have some nice folks who feel some sort of solidarity, whose value system tells them, "Oh, you have to ask, are you okay? You have to ask, can I call 911?" But they're not really prepared to go anywhere beyond what those value systems say you have to do at the surface level. Then we have the creepy crawlers. Now, understand, first responders take action. They involve nice folk, kind of get involved, but on that peripheral level. And then there's the creepy crawlers. Go back to my accident analogy. Most of us have been creepy crawlers before. Why I call it creepy crawlers? Those are the people who neither stop to really consider what's going on or get involved. But you know what they do? They slow traffic down. They drive very slowly, and they do the look. They act like they're not looking, but trust me, they're looking, and they slow down to be able to see what happened, and then they keep going. So in our conversations, we will have the creepy crawlers, people who will not really engage or participate. They'll sit and they'll be very quiet. They're looking, and it could be either for fear, it could be either because they're paralyzed by inactions, whatever it is. Those are the creepy crawlers. The fourth group that you don't see on here, but you do see because I'm going to call your attention to it, are the X's. If you look real closely, you'll see this X outside of the honeycomb boxes there, right? Or whatever those are. I don't know what those shapes are called. Mathematically, I suck, right? So the hexagon. And if it's wrong, correct me in the chat box. But those are folks who are outside of everything. They have no interest in engaging in these kinds of conversations. In fact, these conversations make them uncomfortable, or they already know what they need to know about what they need to know, and so they don't need anybody else telling them what they need to know. And those are the people who are on the outside. I will tell you, in order for us to progress together, in order for us to grow together, productive, respectful conversations and discussions are fundamental. What we're doing at the auxiliary connections level is beginning to show you that these conversations need to happen. What we're hoping at the auxiliary units level is that managers and colleagues continue to have these productive conversations so that we stand together stronger and that we work as one team. Now, I know we're all adults, but I still needed to just make sure that before we dive in, we understand how we're expected to interact on these sessions. So first, understand that these are going to be discussions and not debate. We're not interested in you winning, right? That's not what we're about. We want to hear the different points of views. Remember, today is mostly awareness. So we want to be made aware of those aspects that we may not have considered because of a million different reasons. We want to explore options. We want to look at some of the solutions that exist. We definitely encourage everyone to participate. We definitely want first responders. We definitely want creepy crawlers. And the X's, the outside folks, the peripheral folks, just looking in with no intention of doing anything whatsoever. We do want your participation in these discussions as well. We're not going to allow any one or two people to dominate these discussions because we do want to hear from everyone else. The goal here is to listen to and respect the other's point of view. You don't have to agree, but you can listen. Do your best to understand what are the pros and the cons of what somebody is describing. How do you see them as beneficial? How do you see them as not beneficial? And seek first to understand and not to be understood. So we're going to dive in. And so if you don't have a pen and a paper, I encourage you to take about 30 seconds and grab a pen and a paper, because there may be some things that I will want you to jot down particularly. So I wanted to open the lines, Julia, to anyone who's willing to talk, and I wanted us to talk a little bit about identity, because without understanding our identity, the rest of the conversation really doesn't have any foundation. So who are you? What are those things that you consider your identity? Now, I do have core identity and intersectionalism on the screen. I will explain those later, but right now I just wanted you to identify, what is your primary identity? If your identity was limited to one thing, what would that be? We can chat those in the chat box if you're comfortable doing that, but we would love to hear from you as well. So just raise your hand and we'll unmute your mic, or let us know you want your mic unmuted in the chat box, and we'll do that as well. All right, Julia, we have Morgan.
Hello.
Good morning, Morgan.
Good morning. How are you?
I am excellent.
Excellent. So did you want me to just like go around the circle and label myself in all those, or?
No, I want you to tell us what is your primary, and I know that's difficult for some people who understand the concept of intersectionalism, but let's bring others along board. Okay, so let's start with, what is that identity that you would say it's your primary identity?
Boy, only having I must admit I am a big believer in intersectionality, and usually label 15 words when I'm talking about identity. But I guess actually I would not have even been able to say this just over a year ago. But I think the fact that I identify as a Unitarian Universalist goes a long way towards compacting a whole bunch of stuff into that. Because I didn't even know what they were. I just assumed they were liberal Christians for a long time. And I was like, yay, liberal Christians, I'm glad they exist. But when I first read this list of 7 principles, I was like, wow, I believe all those things. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until I actually went and started attending services and was like, what, I want to check that out. And whoa, oh, okay, this is what church can be. I only experienced church from a very small selection of what church could be. And that was so not for me. I just thought I wasn't for church. But those 7 principles and the degree to which I think those are important, and respecting every person on the planet, and respecting the interconnected web of life that we all those sum up really well a large part of what I am.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Morgan. We appreciate it. Any others who want to talk about what they see as their identity? And I've been trying not to say core or primary. Forgive me if I do, but anything that you see as your identity. We have Jane.
Hi.
Go ahead, Jane.
Good morning. Mine would be education, because growing up, I was 8 years at Catholic school and always going to Catholic church. And so while we were learning, we were taught respect, not just for the elders, but for one another, for authority, for everything was regimented. You did this at this time, you did this at this time. And those who are on the chat who know me, that's how I am. And age, I don't think age really has a lot to do with it. I'm a lot older than all my supervisors, but I can still give them the respect. I mean, I can be ugly and say, well, you're just too young to tell me what to do. They're my their authority. And so you give that. And so sometimes I am judged because of the way I have learned through my life. And you do this because you do this so that you can get that. So I could go on, but I don't want to dominate.
It's okay, y'all. And if you all don't see me on the screen, I've called in as well. So my internet may be having a little bit of an issue. but I will still be on the line. So if the screen's acting funny, I can still hear you, and others still can as well. Julia, do we have any comments from the box that we will want to mention?
Well, we had a lot of comments come in. Ellie says her primary identity is female. We have Anthony Alford. He identifies primarily as 61-year-old Black male. Dana Harbin said blue collar. Dion said educated Black male. And yeah, those are some of the chats that have come in.
That is excellent, and I want people to understand that you don't have to be ashamed of what your primary identity is. Your primary identity, or the identity that you decide, and this is really self-selective, and in some cases, this is where others choose these identities for us. But your primary identity becomes your primary identity. And so it's not something that you have to be shy or afraid of. Julia, do we have any others? Because for me, understanding your identity becomes crucial to even being able to engage in the kinds of deep conversations that we're anticipating to have over the next few weeks.
Stuart's got his hand up. I'm gonna unmute Stuart.
All right, and just understand my computer is dancing like it's at a party right now, so I can't see any of these. So help me out if you can.
So wait, Randolph, are you saying that because I'm in IT and you need me?
I knew you were going to go there, Stuart.
No, to get back to the topic. On my primary identity, I've noticed a change on myself. I think, up until, 3.5 years ago, it was primarily ability. And then something happened. And I realized that, I didn't have that primary identity anymore. And I'm feeling a shift actually towards age instead of ability now, just because of changing circumstances in my life. And it seems like that's something that, maybe a lot of people will experience at some point, is that, whatever your primary identity may be now, it may change.
Absolutely. Any others, Julia?
We have white Christian conservative from Paul. Karen says child of God. Somebody else said white 58-year-old Christian woman. Somebody, Nelson, threw in, I think I identify mostly as an American, perhaps due to my time in the service. Danielle says Jewish single mother. So we had some good chats come in.
So this is what's interesting to me, because as I listen, I hear a lot of us describe intersectionality without thinking about it, because nobody is just one thing, right? And so when Danielle says Jewish mother, those are combinations of two. That is a combination of two separate identity that she's brought together, and that's what intersectionalism is. Honestly, it's almost impossible for you to be able to say I'm just this versus just that, and understand that, as Morgan has said, some of the times the identities that we run to only scratch the surface. So I would love to hear from folks, what are some of those other intersecting identities? And Julia, is it possible for you to allow me to share my screen? I'm back on, and I'm probably under a different alias. We
Yeah,
have
you're co-hosted, so you're
Hannon.
good. Okay. And Richard, let me unmute you.
Hello.
Hey, there you are.
Hi. Yeah, I intersect with education and ability. I always try and learn as much as I can about a certain topic or issue, so I can then be able to help with the situation. Just learning and then putting that learning into action. So I would say my intersecting is the ability and education.
All right. All right. Very good, Ray. Thank you. Now, I want to take us. So the identity question, honestly, was more of a softball to get us really talking. I want us to shift now. Again, our goal today is to start some awareness about race. And it's interesting in our conversation. It was a lot of the identities that were talked about were Black. So it was, I'm a Black X, I'm a Black Y. I did not hear, I'm a white mother. I did not hear any of, I'm a Hispanic male. I didn't hear any of those. And that's because we've been conditioned to not talk about race, such that it actually hinders our ability to move forward on some of the racial issues that we face, both in America in general, at the University of Georgia, in auxiliaries as an organization, and in our intact teams in the units that we work directly in. So I am open to people also identifying or speaking about their racial identities. So I'm going to pause for a second, give you an opportunity to put some comments in or raise your hand, but we can't escape our racial identities. We cannot talk about our racial identities because for some of us, they're our core identity or they're our primary identity. And for others, they're ones that we experience a lot of privilege or oppression about. So I do not want us to skip it. I do want us to be comfortable with talking about our racial identities. So Julia, please let me know when we have some comments in the box about those.
Steve says, I'm an enlightened white hillbilly hippie.
All right.
And I'm pulling over a chat from YouTube for us.
All right.
Ellie says, I don't feel like white defines me, so I don't put it toward the top of my identifying features.
Yeah, and I hear that, and I'm not asking people, my goal is not to force people into identities that they're not, but I do want people to recognize what their racial identities are. And because if we're having a conversation about race, you have to recognize that that is one of your identities. I saw Dana had her hand up. Could we unmute her?
Yep. Dana, are you there?
Yeah, here.
Here we go.
Yeah, so
morning,
I
Dana.
don't. I don't really have to. I don't have to identify as white, but I think it's because I don't ever have to think about the fact that I'm white. Like, there just aren't struggles to overcome. It just is with no challenge. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does. And again, Dana's speaking for Dana. And what we would do in these conversations is to allow people to speak for themselves. Because what I wouldn't want is for somebody to come back and say, well, I don't feel that way. Well, great for you. So we're going to accept Dana's speech as Dana speaking for herself and not for all white people. Same thing. Anthony is not going to speak for all Black people. So I just wanted to establish that kind of a sense. But Dana raises a really important point. As her white identity, that racial identity, is not really something she has to think about because it's not always at the forefront of her mind in terms of her daily and everyday engagement. Thank you for sharing that, Dana. And it's one of the reasons why these kinds of conversations are really crucial and important, because you have to know that there are people whose racial identity is the first thing that is seen, regardless of their ability, regardless of their competence, regardless of any other characteristics or traits that they have. They are judged by what they look like first. I've noticed that the chat boxes lighten up. I can't see it, but I see the little orange thing. Anything from that end, Julia?
Oh yeah, they're on fire today. Everyone's awake this
Very
morning.
good. This is what we want. This is exactly what we want.
Lots of people agreed with Dana about what she was saying. Let's see. Let me put, there was one comment. Nelson Reynolds says, my personal feeling is that breaking all humans into different races negates the fact that we are all one race with different skin colors.
Okay.
Karen, white Irish American woman. Tina, 48-year-old white female. Somebody else says white female. That is what people see on the outside. They don't know my education, sexuality, ability, age, class, etc. from that.
Absolutely. Y'all, these are all some really, really great comments. Keep them coming. We will not, the space that we're trying to create in auxiliaries is not a space where we are fearful of who we are, but it's a space where we can bring who we are and collectively make our worlds better. That's our goal. So our goal isn't to elevate one above the other. Our goal is to make sure that we together are working to build real inclusive spaces. So I'm going to skip that. I'm going to come back to that. But since we started talking about our racial identity, I wanted us to go back to this graphic that Michelle Cook shared with us a couple of weeks ago. And I want us to take a second and process this graphic in terms of our racial identity. And so speak to it. I'm not pushing you towards any answer. I'm pushing you towards the answers that come to your mind based on your racial identity when you look at these. And that's not to say that the intersectionality don't also affect this. We'll add that in as a piece. But let's start with looking at this picture and analyze, at least giving us a sense of what we think about when we see this picture as it relates to our racial identity. So we're welcoming people to raise their hands or start in the chat box. Julia, if we have anything in the chat box, we can read that out.
Yeah, there's comments coming in on some of the other stuff from beforehand. Let's see.
We can work our way up, Julia, so we can start back from some of the additional comments, and then we can get here at some point. We're not in a rush to finish anything. We're having a conversation, and those conversations can go in a lot of different directions.
Okay, so Johnny Lynn typed in, I have a Venezuelan grandmother, but people see me as a young white female. Morgan says, in many ways, diverse cultural backgrounds are much more important than skin color. Ellie says, I think that liberation is the ultimate goal, but it is more difficult to obtain because it requires effort on everyone's part.
Agreed.
And a lot of people don't want to change if they don't have to.
Yeah. So I'm gonna challenge you all. I'm gonna challenge you all. I like the comments that are coming in the chat box. I like them a lot. I think this is the start of these kinds of conversations. So I'm gonna challenge you all to speak out. So raise your hand, unmute your mic, and let's talk about what we see on the screen. Because the first time I saw this was, so Michelle Cook sent us her presentation the night before, so we have it as backup just in case she had technological issues. And that was the first time, and I looked through the presentation, and that was the first time that I saw this. I was in the bed looking through it, and I turned to my wife and showed her that, and I said, wow, I have never thought about it like that. This was such a good depiction of reality, equality, equity, and liberation. So I'm going to put a challenge out there. I would love for somebody to unmute their mic and just talk about what they see based on their racial identity.
Michael's
All right,
got.
we have our hand. Yes, Michael, thank you so much.
Of course. Well, the first thing I think of when I look at this is myself and my wife and my son had a discussion on these same topics just a week ago. And this is the very same image that we looked up on Google to help facilitate that discussion. And one thing that I tried to instill on my son is the idea that equity and liberation, these are the qualities of a mature society, of a matured culture, so that we can look beyond what we think of as quantifiably right and wrong. Like, this is my money because I earned it, or this is my land because of X, Y, or Z. And instead begin looking at things in a more mature way that isn't as selfishly oriented and can look at things in a much longer term. Because I find that when we look at race, in a macro lens, it doesn't serve any purpose for the future, and it's something that was relatively newly conceived. And by relatively, I mean many thousands of years ago. But yeah, I love this image, and I think it really wonderfully displays the subject matter that we're talking about, cultural equality, racial equality, these subjects. So thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the challenge.
Thank you,
Michael.
We
Any other? I saw the chat. Go ahead.
Yeah, we had Terica said she wanted to be unmuted, so I'm gonna give me a second and I'll get her unmuted. Hey, Shaterica.
Hi,
Good
good
morning.
morning. Good morning. Hope you all are doing okay. But no, I just kind of wanted to touch up on this picture and like everything that's going on in the chat, because I've been like more in the chat than on the actual PowerPoint. But this picture does speak a lot of volume to me. Just like Michael was saying, like me and my family, a couple of my family members, like we pulled up this picture as well and talked about it. And they asked each family member like what the picture meant to them. And it was really surprising to like see the answers that we got, because it was like, yeah, we're all a part of the same family. That's my cousin, my auntie, my grandma, this and this and that. But it was it really surprised me to see the different outcomes and the different answers that came from, one actual family. And it's like, even when I'm on campus, when I was saying in the chat box, I was born in America. My family, my mother's side of the family is American, but my dad's side and them are from Kenya. And so when people see me walking around campus or like walking around the dining halls, on the phone with my aunt or my father or, someone else like that, they're just looking at me like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you saying? I can't understand anything you're saying. And it's funny because it's like it brings on that connection. People are just like, you have to teach me what you're saying. Like, I want to know what you're saying. Like, how do you say this word and how do you say thank you? So it's really fun and it's really interesting because most people don't know that I can speak another language. But from being raised up, I was raised up in the country, so I'm used to cows and chickens and horses and trains. So, when I came to Athens, it was just like, what is this city? Like, this is different for me, but it's really interesting. It really stands out a lot.
So I think one of the things that both Michael and Shaterica have brought up that I think will be great for folks to think through is that they have actually taken this image and they have furthered discussions with it. I saw the image and I turned straight to my wife and said, "You've got to see this." And we engaged in a conversation about it. And our kids are watching. Our kids are watching. If you look at the pictures of the protests, and I really wanted to show pictures of the protests that are happening all over this country. I'm in the Loganville area, and there were several hundred people that were a part of a protest in Loganville, a peaceful protest in Loganville, and it was just overwhelming to see that number of people show up. I've seen pictures of the folks in Athens. We don't have rights to those pictures, so I couldn't include it in here. But it is just overwhelming to see how many young people are engaged in standing up for what they feel is the right thing for America and their communities. But so if you're not at that point where you're joining a protest, I encourage you. Your kids are watching. your nieces, your nephews, if you don't have kids, they're watching as well. And these pictures, this picture right here, it's a great conversation starter to see what are the perspectives and opinions. I see Joy's hand. Can we unmute Joy?
Yes, we'll unmute Joy.
Hi. I just wanted to say, you said that our kids are watching, but I'm learning that we need to be watching our kids in a lot of cases. I have an 8-year-old as well as grown kids, but I have an 8-year-old, and his best friend, he's a white 8-year-old. With, if you talk about our culture, we have Native American background, we have Swedish and English background, but if you look at him, he's a white child. His best friend is Vietnamese, and his other best friend is African American. And he doesn't see the differences that as adults we do. You know, he doesn't see color or race. He just sees the person. They're alike in so many different ways, and he's friends with them. And so I look to him to learn from him, because the things that are going on right now in America, he's seeing that and he doesn't understand it. And I have to explain to him that not all people are bad, but there are bad people. And I have to explain to him that, you know, there's no reason to ever kill someone, or there's no reason to ever have bad thoughts about other people. So I'm learning from him. I'm learning from having to explain the evils of this world to him in a way that it doesn't change his view of other people, that he still loves everybody. And so I just thought, as you said, that we need to teach them, but we need to learn from them as well.
Absolutely. I see we've got two hands, Julia. You all are getting me really, really excited, because I'm really thrilled that we can have this conversation and have it in a safe space where we're learning and we're growing together. This is beautiful, and this is exciting. Who do we have, Julia?
We have got Danielle. Let me get her muted. You there?
All right.
Hi,
Good morning, Danielle.
Good morning. Happy Monday, everyone.
It's Tuesday, Danielle.
Oh, it is Tuesday. Sorry, that I'm in a time warp. I don't know what day it is. I know I'm not alone.
I will not allow you to rewind my week. I'm going forward, Danielle.
Okay, all right. Sorry. Happy Tuesday.
Yes.
Oh, thank you for that. I needed that little chuckle. No, I wanted to, I really wanted to go along with what Joy just said. You know, she has an 8-year-old, I have an 11-year-old girl. And, you know, kids today are so much more into technology, and they have they're seeing things that say my generation probably wouldn't have seen. Sorry, Jean just said I made her Wednesday. Sorry. But kids are seeing things that say I as a child probably would not have seen. And you know, so the other day, my daughter is sometimes on TikTok, and I'm sure many other people's kids are too. And so she came to me the other day with this picture that was on TikTok. And it had a line, it was a picture of a protest, and it had a line of police officers, and there was a black man kneeling in front of the police officers. And then the picture kind of looked like other folks, you know, of different races were coming over to the man that was kneeling down. And so it was just a picture. There was no captions, no nothing. And so when my daughter brought me the picture, her interpretation of the picture was, look, those police are trying to arrest that man, and all of the other people behind him are coming to help him. And I just thought, you know, that I find it, I guess my point is, along with joy, you know, we have to make sure that we are the ones that are teaching our children, you know, how to be equitable and how to, you know, and people can say, I don't see color, I don't see this, and you know, that's all well and good, but I think that we have to teach our children how to see people as people, and treat everybody as an individual, treat everybody as they themselves would want to be treated. You know, it falls on us as parents to really change that dynamic in this world.
Yeah.
But that's just my.
Absolutely. Thanks, Danielle. Julie, I did see a few yellow, orange blinks. So did we have more comments from the chat box?
Let's see, let me scroll back. Somebody said, my grandson is actually watching this with me.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
That is actually beautiful that you have your grandson watching. It uplifts my heart and tells us we're doing the right thing and we're on the right track.
Michael said children see reality better than adults, oftentimes. India says to her, the picture speaks to privilege. And yeah.
All right. So again, I didn't intend to spend this long on this picture, but I think it's a fitting picture for where we are and the discussions that need to be had. What I will draw your attention to in this picture, as you have further discussions with others, is to think about the props in the picture. And so by that, I mean, think about the things that they're standing on. Think about the fence and think about how those things are institutional things. And the removal of the fence and the removal of the steps. Think about how institutions and policies, and even, and I'm not just talking institutions and policy from an America-wide standpoint, which is valid in its own rights, but I'm also talking about, think about them even in our auxiliaries. What are those institutions, policies, and actions that we either have done, are doing, or can do in the future that moves us from reality to liberation in how we engage? So just a thought process. I wanted to take us one more step further. So I'm going to show you two images. The one on the screen right now, you've seen it before in the previous presentation that I did, image of Atlanta. And if you look to the right, well, it's not on this one, it's on the next one. The blues, this is the racial dot map. I mentioned it. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at it yet, please do. It's a fascinating way to look at racial divisions in terms of geography in America. This one is just a picture of Atlanta. The blues are the whites, the reds are the Hispanic. I mean, the Asians. Yeah, let me get my colors right. The blues are the whites. I've got it to the right of the screen. The greens are the blacks. The reds are the Asians. The light browns are Hispanics. The dark browns are other races, like the American Indian, etc. I'm going to go back. Let's go back to Atlanta. That's what Atlanta looks like. Why am I showing you a picture of Atlanta? I'm showing you a picture of Atlanta because, believe it or not, an overwhelming majority of the students that come to University of Georgia come from the Atlanta metro area. And so from the counties and cities that you see listed on the screen here. Now, if you think about that they're coming to UGA, and think about how geographically there seems to be this division. So you see it's almost like a V shape, with the south of Atlanta being predominantly green and the north of Atlanta being predominantly blues, with few speckles of brown towards the northeast. Yes, few speckles. I'm terrible at directions. Few speckles towards the northeast of browns and reds. I'll show you the next one. This is Athens. I'm going to stop here for a second. This is Athens. this is what Athens looked like in 2010 when the census was being done. As I mentioned on my last presentation, this will be updated after the completion of the census that's going on right now. And so we'll see some new numbers, we'll see some new colors, etc. But I wanted to pause for a second and ask us as a group, in terms of not just racial identity, but interaction, cross-cultural interaction, what does these maps tell you? In terms of cross-cultural and interracial interactions, what do these maps say? What are the challenges that we see here? What are the opportunities that we see here? Any hands, any comments?
Not yet. Oh, Jeff Arthur says segregated housing. Is what he's seeing from these maps. Seems like there is a dividing line.
It's really interesting to see the concentration of colors in particular places and spaces.
David Helweg says we see that we need to colors more mixed. Yeah.
Yeah. But so let me tell you what I see as an opportunity here. And even if I go back one step to the Atlanta metro area and how those colors are separated, and I come back to Athens, the opportunity that I see is that in our units, on our buses, at our one-stop shop, in our bookstore, these different groups are coming together. The different racial groups are interacting with us. So if you take one auxiliary service employee, you would be amazed at how many races that they interact with on a daily basis. I don't even want to say a daily basis because that's even too much to think about. Think about it on an hourly basis. One of our frontline folks, so somebody at the parking deck or somebody at Panda Express, and I know all my examples seem to be Panda Express. That's because I like the tofu there. But so, parking deck, Panda Express, a bus driver, think about how they interact. Think about how geography kind of goes away, and now it's the one-on-one interaction. We have a really, really big opportunity to exemplify what it means to engage people for who they are rather than what they look like. And it starts with us. It starts with us in auxiliaries. It starts with us in terms of how we treat people alongside us. And only if we can treat people alongside us properly will we be able to then spread that to those who are coming in. It's the racial dot map. You can take a look at it and look at cities that you're from and counties that you're from. This is just a still image on the racial dot map. You can actually go in and see cities and streets and blocks and all of those. It gives you a really deep sense of how we live in these separate and segregated communities. All right. So we don't have the full time to go through this, but these are questions that I will want you to consider. I want you to consider what's happening. Why is this happening? Does this affect me? How does what's happening around us today affect me? And how did we get here? So we have a few minutes. We can start answering these questions. We'll open the lines and open the chat box. You can answer one or all or a couple. What's happening? And that question you see up there, what's happening, was one of the hardest questions for me to type on this screen because I didn't want it to be a leading question, but I wanted people to bring their perspectives to what's happening around here. And so I'm going to stop talking and open up the lines for those who can give us what their mindset, their viewpoint of what's happening around America today is. Why is it happening? Whether or not it affects them. How does it affect them if it does? And how did we get here? So we're open to your comments and thoughts. Any takers, Julia?
Yeah, they're probably typing furiously in the chat box.
All right, we'll give them a minute. I'm sitting across from my daughter, and every time I ask a question, she raises her hand like, can I talk?
Greg says the things that are happening are going to affect all of us.
Well, what is happening? I don't want us to skip what's happening in America today. What is happening? And I really want to know from people's perspective how they see what's going on. Again, these are all foundational things that give us an opportunity to deal with and address properly things down the road. And without establishing some of this foundation, we lose the true opportunity to do lasting work. So I saw Morgan's hand.
Yes, Morgan's hand is up. I'll unmute her. Steve G chatted in. It's a paradigm shift in consciousness. We are waking up. So let's unmute Morgan.
Steve, we'll unmute Morgan, but Steve, if we can unmute you for you to explain to us later on what that paradigm shift in consciousness means, so that we're all on the same page in terms of awareness, we'll appreciate it. You can chat in and let us know whether you're open to us unmuting you to do that. But go ahead, Morgan.
Sure. So actually, I was going to speak to that same kind of thing, though I wasn't necessarily going to use those words.
Oh, please go ahead.
I think that basically what's going on is several months ago, the impossible happened. Our entire country voluntarily shut down, even in places where the government wasn't willing to do that, so that the least among us could be protected. And we're willing to upend our lives and sit on our couches at home and work from home, or like figure out something else to do, et cetera, so that the least among us can be protected. And that was basically an impossibility in everyone's brains until it happened. And then the usual happened again. A black man was killed by police, and it was caught on tape, like it has been so often before. But this time, people knew the impossible could happen. And so they weren't willing to sit by and just wait for it to happen again and again and again. And yeah, it only started in a few places, but then people saw that. They were like, well, it can happen here too. And they turned out to their streets. And then people heard about that and they turned out again. I mean, I didn't even know about the Athens protests until the day after they happened, but I was there Saturday, and it was empowering and powerful and wonderful.
That's good to hear. That's very good to hear. Thanks, Morgan. Any other hands? Steve, was he open to explaining a little bit more?
Oh, yes. Steve's going to let us unmute him. So let me find him. Right, we've had a lot of chats come in too, so. Let's see, Steve. There we go.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yeah.
We can hear you, Steve. Good morning.
Good morning. I really agree with what Morgan just said, and I also agree with what Darnell chatted in. We are really picking at a leaf of racism. I really think that the paradigm shift is that is happening here is just because people have that time to reflect, and they have that time to open themselves up, and they see it and they feel it. And I think coronavirus has kind of allowed people to have that introspection. So it's weird to think that there's this much positivity that can come out of staying at home, but I really do think that it's allowing us to look inside ourselves and open up.
All right. So thank you so much, Steve, for speaking up. Y'all, it is right at 10:59. We have 1 minute. I know we had a couple of hands and a few chats. Tuesday, can you read a few things in the chat? This is just part one. We will continue these conversations. We will have one of these at least once a week, either at the 10 a.m. hour or the 2 p.m. hour, and we will pick up exactly from where we left off. Let's just get a few more comments from in the box. We'll close this conversation down for now and pick up where we left off.
Yeah, I'll read Darnell's chat that Steve was mentioning. He said, we are all picking at the leaves of this tree of racism. What are the roots of this tree? We've got to get to the roots. of this racism tree. And once we do, there won't be any real solutions until we get to the roots.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are great comments, Darnell. I will tell you, I worry about that. I love the activism that's going on, but I'm worried, and I'm hopeful that people's consciousness don't move on to something else until we deal with some of the root causes. I actually firmly believe that dealing with those root causes have everything to do with what we as individuals and we as an organization do on a daily basis. So for auxiliary services, I want you all to understand that diversity is key to our organizational success. If we don't have differences on our team, we can't be successful. If we don't have differences in the clientele that comes to us, we definitely can't be successful. Our ability to engage in a diverse environment, that should be diverse, is key to our organization's success. If our folks don't know how to handle and deal with and interact in diverse environments, we won't be successful. And last but not the least, relationships and respect are key to our organization's success. This is just the start of the conversation. I encourage you not to stop here. So if you're a manager, if you're a supervisor, if you're a team member, continue to have these conversations across your team. Let's continue to talk about this as an organization. I know senior leadership is fully behind us, really consciously working towards ensuring that our spaces are spaces of inclusive excellence. I'm really proud to be a part of the team of people working behind the scenes to ensure that in our actions, in our policies, and in the processes that we do. Thank you all for kicking off what I think is a great start to our diversity conversations. I look forward to chatting with you at the 2 o'clock session and at subsequent sessions that we do around this. Julie, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Great. Yep, we'll go ahead and wrap up. One comment that came in on YouTube that I wanted to make sure that everyone got to hear was that today is a voting day, so go out and do that. Somebody reminded us on YouTube. Everyone stay safe, and we will see you at 2 p.m. for part 2 of Discovering Your Strengths.
Take care.